welcome to another episode of the Unscripted. I'm your host, Carter Elliott, here with my co-host, Greg Waddell. We are recording this after another Michigan State loss, unfortunately. That makes two straight episodes where we are talking about Michigan State losses to teams that I went into the game thinking that we should win. One being I thought we should maybe win because you could blame other factors. I personally wasn't putting on other factors, but things like the words fatigue flew around, travel, injuries, of course, which we all know about and everyone knows about. But this game was one that I thought was the perfect spot just to get a W under your belt. Get a nice Big Ten win under your belt. You're at home. You had a couple of days rest. You can bounce back. But no, if you look really closely behind me, you might be able to see the ghost of Boo Buie haunting me. And that's just a precursor of what we're going to get into on this episode of The Unscripted, presented by the Field of 68. Thanks to them, as always. Greg, you're supposed to be Mr. Positive on Unscripted this year, and they're testing the patience. So talk to me on where you're at right now.
Yeah, about a week ago, I came on this very program and praised myself for being Mr. Positivity, seeing that that may have attributed to Michigan State's 5-2 start. Maybe something shifted. I don't know. Last episode, I feel like I was not as positive. I'm going to try my best to stay in that mode because I know that's what people want from me. I'm a role player. I got to play my role. I got to play D. I got to make shots. I got to be on my Pierre Brooks. But it's hard right now because there's a lot of things we said in the offseason that were skeptical and were nervous and were negative that seem to have really bared themselves out over the last week. I would just like to, can I have like 2 minutes at the top to just go no Mr. Positivity and then I'll put the hat back on?
Greg, you can do it. As a co-host of this pod, of this here show, you have the freedom to do whatever you so please, sir. So, moving forward, don't ask. Just go.
Okay. I'd like 2 minutes at the top, and then I promise to our listeners this won't last all episode. But on October 13th, 2022, I tweeted, "Good morning to everyone who is willing to acknowledge that Boo Buie is 2-1 against AJ Hoggard in his career with these head-to-head averages. Buie 18 points, 4 assists, 1 turnover a game. Hoggard 5 points, 3 assists, 2 turnovers per game." My mentions were in shambles that day, Carter. You just made this up for clicks. He started none of those games. This is a stretch even by your standards. Like, this is beyond meaningless. How dare you do this? You're such a hater. They won't like this narrative. Well, AJ Hoggard off the bench. He was benched for the first conference game of the season. 6 games is what it took for AJ Hoggard to be benched. Off the bench, he delivers one of the best performances of his career. It wasn't enough to knock off Boo Buie, who led all scorers with 20 points and is now 3-1 head-to-head with AJ Hoggard. Again, AJ, the guy who called Michigan State's backcourt the best backcourt in the conference, is now 1-3 in his career against Chase Audige and Boo Buie. Cannot be more clear about that. A week ago, Cart, I had the audacity to tweet, let me make sure I get this right, word for word here, essentially saying, 4 days ago, Big Ten play starts in 4 days. Does the fatigue magically go away for a team that has 6 playable Division I players healthy between now and then? A lot of good responses. Do teams normally play 4 games away from home in 6 days? Well, they have 3 days of rest. They're getting Akins back, so I'm assuming, yeah. It was just fatigue, right, Cart? It was just fatigue. Turns out maybe it wasn't just fatigue. Turns out maybe there were some real issues with this team that were very clear during the Notre Dame game that weren't just we had to catch a red eye 3 days ago. So I'd love to talk about those issues today. I thank you for allowing me to take a quick little victory lap, but I would just like to throw out the 30 people in my mentions attacking me, calling me a hater, calling me a biased asshole. Where were you last night? Didn't see you in my mentions. Didn't have any sort of back and forth with you. Would have loved to talk about what I saw the last night. So don't dish it if you can't take it when you realize you're wrong. That's my energy this morning, Cart. And now I'm going to drink a frosted froth coffee that's probably going to get in my mustache the rest of this episode.
Okay, 1, that looks fire. 2, that rant was very well executed with receipts and everything that needed to be done. I commend you on that. And I want to comment on that because, look, it's almost comical at this point that in all 7 to 8 years that Boo Buie has been at Northwestern, this guy is literally a Spartan legend because he's a Spartan killer. Like no, like it was a funny joke, like a funny little trope at first. Like when we went to Northwestern a couple years ago, you know, if you look back at any year, no matter how good, bad Michigan State's team is, you're gonna get a game where we lose to Northwestern. That's gonna happen, whether it be at Northwestern. Usually it's at Northwestern, but this past 2 years, this is 2 straight years that we have lost to Northwestern at home. And I don't want to misquote this, but I believe I heard this from the Big Ten play-by-play person last night. This is the first time this happened since like 1952, 62, something like
years,
that.
60 years.
Like that is absolutely a wild stat. And I mean, the main issue though, and I'd like to get your kind of point of view. This is kind of why I like Unscripted, because I know we talk a little bit about the game back and forth, but I feel like sometimes we come from different spectrums. So it gives people a different view of what the game is. My main takeaway and my main issue with this team is the defense. The defense that we saw at the beginning of the year, and let me say this, it's defense outside of the issues as far as injuries and having enough players, depth, things like that. I feel like I don't want to talk about that every single episode, even though it might be true, because it is what it is. It's a staple. Like you might as well just put that in the bio of Unscripted, like Unscripted Michigan State podcast. We have issues with depth. Like that's just is what it is. It's going to be that going forward in the year. But the defense that we saw earlier in the year from this team is absolutely nowhere to be found. And it's a lack of intensity. It's a lack of attention to detail. The breakdowns out of the pick and roll. I mean, there was plenty of plays I can point to last night where simple switches weren't made on guard-to-guard handoffs or guard-to-guard screens, and guys got easy layups. It was just a very, very tough performance defensively. And, I think one of the things I miss most about Malik Hall being on the floor is Malik Hall, not saying he's a great defender, but he's a better defender than some of the options that we have right now. Like for all of the good that I guess comes from Pierre Brooks shooting 40% from three, don't let that 40% trick y'all. Some of those threes that he's taken are not good shots. I'm sorry. Like I love that he's not shot shy, but some of the shots aren't the best shots necessarily taking in game and time situation. And defensively, that man is absolutely lost. Like he is a turnstile on defense. It's alarming kind of how bad he is on defense. And, for all the good that he's doing on the offensive end, being a 40% shooter, like we were earning for that last year when we had to watch Cormac throw up bricks after brick. Defensively, we are lacking. And for all the shit that we gave Cormac last year, he actually was an okay defender at times. At least he wasn't as bad as Pierre Brooks. What do you think happened with this team defensively? Is it just basically they're kind of finding their level and the early in their year was more of a fluke, or the injuries? What is it?
Without pointing too mean of fingers here, it's Pierre Brooks, right? Like Pierre Brooks is one of the worst defenders in the country right now. I've watched a lot of college basketball. I've watched as many teams as I can. Everybody knows I'm trying to collect data. I'm trying to learn what teams are good so I can, one, win bets on them, and two, fill out a good bracket in March. Like that's what I do as a college basketball fan. Pierre Brooks single-handedly makes more eye-popping mistakes defensively than any other player that I've seen. And you can point to individual possessions from the last few games, but I think there was a 1-point game with like a minute and a half, and then Northwestern took a timeout. It was after AJ got the second big finish in contact, and he didn't get the call. And Chris Collins takes a timeout, and it come right out of the timeout, and they basically run like the little handoff to get Boo Buie downhill, going to his right. And it looked like it either should have been a fundamental switch between AJ Hoggard and Pierre Brooks, or not a switch. But either way, neither one of them communicated. AJ looked baffled at Pierre, and from my eye, it looked like Pierre Brooks just straight up left his man. and Boo Buie gets a wide open floater, essentially game over from there once the next possession shot was missed. So that has happened to me. Like, that was happening all game in the Notre Dame game. It was happening throughout the Northwestern game. And I think you and I were texting about it early in the Notre Dame game. Like, I mean, Pierre's literally just like running to the wrong guy on closeouts. Like, again, it's very visually obvious mistakes from him.
Right. Like, and sorry, I don't want to cut you off, G. Like, when you point to the visually, like, things that you can see, the not switching. Another one of his big issues is helping when he's on strong side corner and leaving guys like Cormac Ryan, who obviously we saw what happened, and leaving guys like Ty Berry and Boo Buie and these guys that, and guys that are, I would say, are streaky shooters more so in the Northwestern game, see one go in and get going. And then at that point, they're gaining confidence, and confidence is building throughout the game. And credit to Northwestern. I can't believe I'm saying this. Credit to Northwestern and credit to Chris Collins, a coaching, feather he could put in his cap. They were going at Pierre, like they were putting him in spots. Like,
that's right.
That's right. They knew, they identified the weak link on the defense and they went at it. I 100%. Can't believe I just gave Chris Collins a coaching feather in his cap, but.
No, you're right. He was picking that matchup, and that's a matchup that every coach in the country should pick at right now. I think Izzo had a really fascinating quote, or not even fascinating. I use that word too much. He had a very on point quote after the game that said, right now we have guys who can make shots and we have guys who can guard. We don't have enough guys that can do both. And he's dead on with that. And I think that's directly pointed at Pierre Brooks. I also think that is directly pointed at AJ Hoggard a little bit. Except for AJ, sometimes AJ doesn't guard and he can't make shots. And I think we got to talk separately about the move to the bench for him, because that's, to me, the largest thing that happened in this game. But the thing, like, man, it's hard for me to hear Tom Izzo say we don't have enough guys in any way, shape, or form. We don't have enough guys who blank, because he chose not to have enough guys. And that's not to say he could have gone and fixed everything and gotten an All-American in the portal. I'm not even asking for that. But the two targets he went after were wings that would be playing over Pierre Brooks right now, or at least spelling him, right? I mean, Micah Parrish is shooting 42% from three-point range, averaging 8 points a game off the bench for a really good defensive San Diego State team.
And he's a great defender.
He's a great defender and a 42% shooter. Jalen Bridges can't make a shot this year, but he's starting for Baylor, averaging 9 points a game. So to me, again, like, those are role players, but role players that can play a role for very good teams that are better than Michigan State right now, and San Diego State and Baylor. And Izzo knew that was a need. He tried to fix it, and then he just stopped. That's the thing that I don't get. And, again, it's pointing fingers back at the summer. We don't want to do that. We want to talk about where this team is now, but it's really, really hard to talk about where this team is now and ignore that decision, because he had, like, he correctly identified how much this team needed another wing. And to me, that was even almost as big as how badly they needed a center. And here we are saying we don't have enough bodies, but you're right. If Malik Hall gets back, I think it fixes a lot of it, because Malik playing 30 minutes is a guy who can make shots and defend. But like we said, we're how many games in now? 9 games into the season. And there's a lot on the plate of the guys he's putting and starting. Like, Joey Hauser didn't shoot well last night, and Joey Hauser couldn't come off the floor, because even right now, guys have to play 30 to 35 minutes, even when they're playing really poorly, because there are no other answers. And that's going to wear this team down. It just is.
Yeah, and it's also a trickle-down effect to actually the gameplay, because to me, not only is it you have injuries, you have fatigue. Last night, Tyson Walker picks up his 4th foul with like 12 minutes left in the second half, and we're looking to the bench and we're like, where we're going? Like, we're looking, there's literally not guys there. We are a couple we are like 2 like turned ankles or like some hamstring pulls or something away from like getting like Nick Sanders and Steven Izzo minutes. Like, in all seriousness, with like how the bodies are adding up with this team and the injuries, It's still Jay Nakins seems to still not be 100%, but we were forced to play him because we don't have people, which sucks because I would love for him to get healthy instead of me being on, eggshells every time he, takes a step. And, I thought he showed some things last night, but it looked like he might just be still had that nagging, lingering injury. We don't know when Malik Hall is coming back. The boot is still on. I don't have any intel as far as when he's going to be back. And like you said, we're 9 games into the season and all these issues basically are hitting. And I find myself kind of wondering what the solution is instead of just pointing out, all the negatives. I mean, I would say that we get back to what we were doing earlier in the year, but earlier in the year, I thought our calling card was execution, defense, and attention to detail. And it seems like the last 3 games, I'll say the last 3-4 games, the attention to detail, the defense, and the intensity just hasn't been there, whether it be fatigue, whether it be depth, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to put the blame on, it hasn't been there. How they regain that, I don't really know that answer. I think they have to answer that themselves, but it's not really looking too bright right now, is what I'll say.
Yeah, I think it's been hard for me to square what I saw at the Champions Classic with what has developed over the last week.
Night and day.
It's night and day, but I also like the clearest I've gotten to trying to make sense of it is in the game. And again, preface all this with they had Malik Hall, like they're fully healthy. That's the biggest thing by far. If they just have Malik Hall, they're in a much better spot. I don't know that if they have Malik Hall, they win either of the last 2 games, though. They certainly don't win the Notre Dame game. Maybe that's enough to swing the Northwestern game. I don't know. But to me, the largest thing in the Kentucky game was Tyson Walker was masterful in that game, and Joey Hauser was masterful in that game. And Tyson didn't even shoot the ball incredibly. I think he was like 4 for 13 maybe that game. But
wait, are you talking about last night or Kentucky?
In the Kentucky game.
Oh yeah.
I don't even mean like that. I just like he was kind of the constant threat in that game, right, from the backcourt. And I think like Tyson sort of, to me, and I know he's had the death in the family, so maybe that's hanging over him. And I hope, I don't know how you move on from something like that, but Tyson has not been the guy he's been all season the last 2 games. Foul trouble last night. Just, I don't think shot the ball great in the Notre Dame game and was not all the way there. How could you be there, right? But the point is the burden of scoring is so much on those 2 guys. And if they make there was a lot of text last night, a couple tweets, again, the Joey Hauser game, like, oh, Joey's not here tonight. Joey almost had a double again. Like
we didn't have Joey, probably lose that game by 20.
Joey's worst games are he damn near gets a double, and people don't care about that production. They just care if he makes 5 threes. And he's not going to do that every game. He's just not. And neither is Tyson. And that's sort of the issue I think this team looks really good when those 2 guys look great. And when those 2 guys just have average games, then it's like, well, this offense isn't very good. So then they got to be great defensively. They're not going to be great defensively if Pierre Brooks is playing 20 minutes. So it's hard because I think more than anything, it's a caliber of personnel thing. And the hard part is, like, if this team was magically healthy all year, probably in a good team, a pretty good team, right? Like, this team was good enough to go toe to toe with a Kentucky team who we think is a little overrated, but like, Kentucky's a good program. But we don't know if we're going to see the fully healthy team again. And we know the team that's not fully healthy is not that good. So it's hard because, maybe Izzo would have been right if this team magically did stay healthy. As long as they're not healthy, it's hard to say he was right in the offseason going this route.
Yeah. And another thing for me, actually, Gregory, I know you like games on the Unscripted podcast. I got a quick little trivia / game for you. Okay. Because I did a little research last night. Who had the highest plus minus yesterday for Michigan State?
Oh, as a total guess?
They're a +9, just I mean,
my gut might say AJ Hoggard, but that goes so counterintuitive to what I normally think about AJ Hoggard. I'm going to go. It's either Joey or AJ.
No, not either of those.
Mady Sissoko?
Mady Sissoko. And you want to know who was second in plus minus positive?
Who?
Which is why I don't like plus minus, Pierre Brooks.
That's crazy.
So that shows you eye test failed. Lowest was actually Tyson.
I thought Mady was pretty good last night.
I think you know what? Mady looks the best when we're not posting him up. Like when his only touches are lobs. No, like lobs.
Oh yeah. You're right.
It looks good. I mean, that left-handed lob that he had yesterday was absolutely crazy.
He also had a really nice help side block with about 1 second on the shot clock that, like, I just don't think he's normally been reading that rotation correctly. So it was good to see. I was impressed with Mady last night. I was not impressed with his backups, who continue to look like they would come off the bench in the MAC. Am I wrong on that?
No. I mean, I just don't think Carson Cooper is surely not ready to play at this level. I don't think Jackson Kohler is, unfortunately, yet. Maybe I'm kind of waiting on him to have that breakout game, or whatever that might be, breakout game where he kind of maybe figures it out a little bit, plays a little, but it just hasn't looked there. I think he's had trouble defensively. It seems like he's struggling also to rebound the ball. Like he's getting in the spots, he's boxing out, but as far as grabbing the ball and securing it, seems to be struggling, rushing on the offensive end, looking unnervy on finishes around the basket. And then Carson Cooper, he had the one dump off where he dunked it yesterday, but defensively, he's absolutely lost. It's just, just very, very tough sledding right now. And, looking ahead just a little bit here to the Penn State game, we're playing a team with a bunch of 40% 3-point shooters where you need to be glued to your man and you need to be locked in defensively. And this is a team that is made up to cook us because of where we're at defensively. So it's a very scary game.
Yeah. This ain't your normal Penn State for anybody that's just listening to this and, assumes, oh, Penn State, winnable game. Like this Penn State offense is awesome. This could be a big AJ Hoggard game to me, which might be a nice segue into the Hoggard conversation we need to have. But they run everything through a bigger point guard who likes to post up, named Jalen Pickett, who is a transfer point guard from Siena. They won the transfer point guard roulette game that I love to talk about. Either you win or you lose that game. Penn State won it. And he's awesome. He's probably the best guard in the Big Ten, even better than my boy Boo Buie. And they've surrounded him with 40% shooters. They barely play a center, and they just post up Jalen Pickett on your guards. And if you send a double, he passes, and they find a wide open shooter. And they're really good at making rotation passes and swinging it around the perimeter and finding the guy. And if you don't double, Pickett goes to work, and he'll go get his 20, 25, 30 points a game. So if Michigan State puts Tyson on him, he's going to eat in the post, and they're going to have to double. If Michigan State puts Hoggard on him, I think he's big enough to hold up, but he might get in some foul trouble. I don't really know. It'll be an interesting matchup, but point is, you can't fall asleep defensively on this team, and I'm terrified of what Pierre Brooks will do in that game. Can we flip to AJ, though? I think we got to have that conversation. Yeah,
we can flip to AJ. For me, I was overall happy with AJ's performance in the whole game. It's weird for me because I find myself watching it, and then in the first half, I'm like, sometimes I'm just like, what, like, where's AJ at, like, mentally right now? Like, it just kind of seems like he's just, I don't know, just floating out there. And then, we need him in the second half, and he's absolutely just taking over. He's putting guys in the right position in the pick and roll. He had a couple, skip passes to the corner off the pick and roll that were just on the money, and Tyson was able to knock down. He was able to get to the basket, make some layups, had some great passes to Mady for some dunks, and looked like he was rolling, but we just couldn't get the stops on the defensive end. And I personally don't think it was necessarily AJ fault on the defensive end. But I don't know, where are you at? I thought all in all, I was feeling good about the AJ Hoggard experience off the bench because I thought it could have gone worse necessarily. I thought like he could have been like pissed, disengaged, and I don't think he was. At least in the game as a whole.
In the game as a whole, I agree. I definitely think it could have gone worse. Also, since this is the episode of victory laps and patting myself on the back, AJ Curbelo might be the best thing I've ever conceived mentally. This is playing out word for word like Andre Curbelo last season, way more than I even thought it would, and no one can deny that at this point. By the way, just quick fact, Andre Curbelo, first game he was benched last season for Illinois, first game of conference play. AJ Hoggard, first game he was benched, first game of conference play, identical. The thing with AJ for me right now, I thought this was his best performance of the year. Really not close. He did have against Villanova, he had 10 assists, so that was a really good game. But I thought he was the only guy who was really there during crunch time, and he kept Michigan State in the game. Could have been a win very easily, and it would have been a win because of the offensive plays AJ Hoggard made getting downhill at the end of the game. He was finding shooters in the second half. Pretty impressive stuff. Looking at Hoggard, like this surprised me a little bit. I went back and looked at his lines from the year. He's played 30 or more minutes in 7 of the 9 games so far this season. This was his first game with less than 3 turnovers, which I think is why. I mean, Izzo essentially said he's coming off the bench because he can't stop turning the ball over. So if that's all it was, step one in the right direction here. Like, he limited his turnovers finally. But it's big to me because, like, I think AJ Hoggard has been pretty mediocre on the season as a whole. And at the end of last year, he was really, really good. Like, going back, you can look, he had, I believe, 5 straight games at the end of the year before the Duke game, from the Big Ten tournament run through Davidson in the tournament, where he had an offensive rating of like 110 or higher, which is really, really good. He's only had 3 games this season where he cracks 100 on the offensive rating scale. Most of his offensive rating stuff has been like in the 80s, 90s. Like, that's really bad for a starting point guard. And it's not close to what the best version of AJ Hoggard has been in his career. So I don't know that it's mental. I don't know what it is. I genuinely think it's just this, Cart. People won't like this. I think AJ Hoggard's a big stats, bad team guy. I just think that's what it is. And if he's your best player, you're probably losing a lot of games. And I think AJ Hoggard was the best player on Michigan State in both the Notre Dame and the Northwestern game. And that's not good. There's a correlation there. We saw what this team looks like when Tyson Walker and Joey Hauser are the best players. It's good enough to beat Kentucky. It's good enough to almost beat Gonzaga. And now we're seeing the version where, well, AJ Hoggard's the guy who shows up. Not good. And
see, I'll push back on that because his offensive performance in the second half last night was good enough to win us that basketball game. Defensively, we just weren't getting the stops.
Yeah, but there's something about that, though. Like, I know it's hard to say. Like, it's hard to differentiate. But, like, there are some guys on a basketball court, just in the way the game of basketball is played at any level, in college and NBA and freaking pickup at IM West. There are some guys that when they're cooking and playing their best game, other guys on the court aren't elevated by that. And I know that sounds weird to say with Hoggard because he's an assist-first guy. Like, he's a passer. He was finding guys' looks. But I genuinely believe, like, when AJ Hoggard is the guy who's scoring for Michigan State, the rest of this team shuts down. And sometimes he has to do it. Like, sometimes he has to put his cape on and say, I'm the only guy here. Let me go do it. But it reminds me of Curbelo. And I keep coming back to that because Curbelo was this genius passer who can, oh my God, is he going to average 10 assists a game? But in reality, he was like oddly selfish. And when he was scoring the ball, Illinois was really bad. Like, that's what I see from AJ right now. It's a bad sign that he's had to be the guy the last 2 games because he has to be the guy out of desperation because no one else on Michigan State's there offensively. And I don't know where you go from here. I think the fact that he was benched is overall really bad. It would be better to me if Akins was healthy. Like, if Akins was just clearly healthy and not made of glass right now, then it's like, okay, we got a backcourt of 2 guys who can both shoot and defend. Perfect. Run with it. AJ's off the bench. But if Jaden Akins is still a shell of himself, which I think he is right now, then I don't know what message that sends to AJ. The very first play of this game, he had a lazy cut, and you can blame Tyson Walker for the pass, but I thought it was a half-ass cut. He didn't come to the ball at all. Turned immediate fast break and one. Like, there were good and bad from AJ today. I don't think this is going to end. I think the saga is far from over, and it's a terrifying proposition, Cart.
100% is. And I'll wrap this episode with this. Right here is my aforementioned panic button. Picture this as a big red button. All right. I'm not pressing this yet. My hand is on it. My hand is on the button. Okay. This Penn State game, for me, like I said, a lot of good shooters, a game we could easily lose. Depending on our play in that game, I will be either pressing this button or putting it down.
Wow.
I think I've reached that point. I know it's early in the season, but usually when we're not playing well, I'm able to kind of look ahead or look to kind of pinpoint an issue and see where an area where we can fix that. And unfortunately, I don't really see that this season based on the play and kind of what we've seen. So this Penn State game is going to be a big one. I'm sure we'll be back talking about that game mainly on the next episode of Unscripted, because after that we got a couple cupcake games, even though, I don't know, Brown, who knows, don't want to take their best punch.
Never know. Hey, in the spirit of transparency and receipts, let me end with this, Cart. Yesterday at 6:23 p.m., you tweeted, Nebraska currently has a better tournament resume than Michigan. Big road win for the Huskers. How you feeling about Michigan State's tournament resume right now? Because I'd like to throw this out, Cart. They are 5-4, coming off back-to-back losses to Notre Dame and Northwestern, teams that are likely not going to make the NCAA tournament. KenPom has Michigan State's projected record this season as of today at 16-15, 8-12 in Big Ten play. That team making the tournament?
Yes.
16-15?
Yes.
So if they lose one game in the Big Ten tournament, they're 16-16, and that team's making the NCAA tournament?
Wins over Kentucky. That Villanova win will be good. True road win at Portland.
Will that be good? Villanova's awful. Like
that Villanova win is gonna look better at the end of the year because they got Cam Whitmore back. They're gonna be playing a lot better.
Okay,
that win's gonna look better.
Okay, I think they got one win over a team that's firmly in the tournament right now, which it is more than Michigan has. You're right, but
exactly.
Has a team with 16 losses ever been an at-large in the NCAA tournament?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I also tweeted yesterday while we're talking about receipts. Imagine losing to Kentucky in basketball. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut before games. So I take the blame, honestly, for last night's loss. But we'll wrap this episode. It's another episode of The Unscripted, a Michigan State podcast presented by the Field of 68. As always, thank you for joining me, Greg. Let's I love an episode with a win. So let's see what we do at Penn State. And then we'll talk about where I'm at with my panic button and also just my overall mental well-being.
Go green, go white.